Hey everybody, and welcome to our very first YouTube character profile. This isn't actually new, but it might be new to you depending on how long you've been listening to the podcast. If you've been watching Coronation Street recently, you might be wondering, who's this John Stape they keep going on about?
Who is he?
Well, we're going to tell you. We have told you, like years ago, but now
told
you
you
can
already.
listen to it again. So yeah, his name has been brought up quite a bit, and you know what, it was a bit of a wrong one, but
you
accidental. I thought John was great.
As you're about to
John
find
Stape
out,
anyway.
Michael really has a soft spot for John Stape. This is recorded. God, how long ago was this recorded?
Years ago.
From
Like 4 or 5 years ago.
episode 171 of the show. We're now on episode 400 and something. So
401. Yeah, this was taken from the time when Hope has just been diagnosed with intermediate neuroblastoma. That's right, Hope has survived cancer and everything.
yes,
Enough to turn anybody crazy arsonist.
yes.
Don't use that as an excuse.
Don't
Anybody
use
else
it as
has
an
had
excuse. There is a 20% chance she'll die, but as we know, that didn't happen.
She's not, although she did change. She has changed actresses since then, so I
So
don't know whether that's some
spiritual
kind of
death.
weird side effect. But yeah, anyway, so coming up now, we've got our discussion, how long, 20 minutes or so,
20
all about
minutes.
John Stape. So if you don't know who he is, hopefully by the end of this you will. And if you do and you just want to relive some classic John Stape moments,
Oh, get ready because you're
this
going to
is
have
the
some
video for you. And by video we
memories.
mean audio with a picture of John Stape.
Enjoy.
It's classic character profile time now, and I had a bit of a difficult time thinking about who we could do this week. And in fact, I did prepare a whole other classic character profile for a different character this week until I decided to change it. So we've got one in the bank at least. This week we are going to be going down the Hope link, the Hope storyline link, and looking at our old dad, John Stape.
Good old John Stape.
Who is actually one of
What
our
a
favourite
crazy-
characters, isn't he, of the past
crazy
5 years?
guy.
He is, and I had so much fun kind of doing the research for this because he got his... It's just the situations he got himself into, isn't it? Because he's like... He kind of goes down as a bit of a villain because, you know, he did kind of kill some people. But he was just a nice guy, in the same way as like Billy was a nice guy. But he just had bad things happen to him, really, wasn't
It
it?
wasn't his fault, Your Honour.
It wasn't.
It was all a series of unfortunate misunderstandings.
And it's also kind of... I also kind of identify the teacher side of him as well, of course.
I know, I always get worried when you say how much you like John Stape, because I can sort of imagine you turning into him.
What? Why?
Because of the series of unfortunate misunderstandings to befall you. You might accidentally murder some people and roll them up in the carpet.
I might do that, but hopefully not.
Hopefully not. He was born on the 22nd of November 1979 and he died. That's right, he's dead, because I forgot to. 28th of October 2011. So maybe that would be a nice anniversary that they can bring up in the show.
Oh, yeah.
He was married to Fiz Brown, which is why she's still called Fiz Stape, in 2009, and they had Hope in 2010. He first appeared on the 6th of May 2007, last appeared on the 28th of October 2011. He was in 340 episodes and he was played by Graham Hawley.
So there's a bit of a strange background to John Stape in the show, because he knew Fizz before he came into the programme, and I think before even Fizz was in the programme. It was about 1998 or so when he was 19 and working as a DJ, and I can't really see John being a DJ, but that was the story they had back then. And Fizz was 13 at the time, and she knew him from that. And he was quite popular with the girls, but he was only interested in Fizz. And I find it... I can't remember exactly how it was, but it just seems a bit strange to me that this 19-year-old DJ was interested in a 13-year-old.
Well, also that is the definition of a paedophile, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean...
I don't think you could write that storyline now.
I don't think so as well. And people, I mean, when they talked about it on the show, people must have kind of raised an eyebrow about it, but I don't really remember. It was just kind of implied, yes, they had known each other before.
Is it not a case of the fact that she says, oh, when I was at school there was a DJ and I fancied him, and then if you do the maths you'll find out that she was actually 13 and he was...
Well, yeah, possibly, but...
I think it's probably... I'm going to go out on a limb and say, and give him the benefit of the doubt here.
I would hope so, because everything we said about him just being a generally nice guy...
If you're going to... Yeah, I mean, you would never be able to write that scenario.
No, and keep
And
both
just
of the,
brush it under
and
the
keep both of the
carpet.
characters being like innocent and nice and likeable. But anyway, he went off to university then, and he lost contact with her until 2007, when he was a teacher working at Weatherfield High, and he re-encountered Fizz when Chesney was involved in the school production of Bugsy Malone. Fizz was going out with Kirk at the time, but she and John rekindled their romance, for whatever the romance was before then, and they were back together as a couple, but in secret.
Sophie got jealous
Yeah, Sophie, because I think Sophie fancied John as well at the time.
Well, it's one of those things where if you're a teacher in a secondary school, I'm sure that
Well, there will
if
be
you're
girls
young,
that are, yeah.
there'll be girls that fancy you just because of the fact that you're
Yeah.
the only guy around that they know.
Even girls that turn out to be lesbians, like Sophie.
Or a lesbian, as they're called. She
Can't let
vandalises
it go.
Fizz's scooter when she finds out they're seeing each other.
Yeah.
Then John starts giving Sally English lessons so that she can reset her A-levels. She fancies him, and then he buffs her, but he would rather go out with the 16-year-old Rosie while he's still seeing Fizz.
Is there something about him that I can't see? Because I wouldn't say that John or Graham Hawley is the kind of guy that people will be falling at the feet of. Yeah, this is how it's been written.
It's because he's the only intelligent man under the age of 65 who lives on Coronation Street.
Oh, you could be right. I mean, Sally was interested in him, I suppose, because of his intelligence. She wants to better herself, doesn't she? And she's like, oh, he knows about Shakespeare and everything. I
think you're underestimating the lure of a man with power to a woman. That's why I love you, because you are a teacher.
Yeah, all the girls
and
fancy me.
Everyone knows it's like firefighters, doctors, and teachers. They are the hunky ones.
I like a man in school uniform.
Oh, yes, so wonderful. Teaching me my time.
So he sets to having this affair with Rosie while still going out with Fizz, and that leads to one of my favourite, well, one of many favourite John Stape scenes at Christmas, when he buys them both sexy lingerie for Christmas. Well, Fizz's is a bit more functional because, as you can imagine, Fizz had rather large knickers as a present, and and Rosie had sexy skimpy ones.
All you need to do is say they had different size pants.
But they got there was a mix-up in Corrie comedy fashion, and Fizz ended up opening Rosie's little pants, and Rosie ended up opening Fizz's. So the truth all came out because he couldn't really hide why he would have given them those. And so the affair is uncovered, and Kevin beats John up, and then John leaves the street. He got back because he wanted another chance with Fizz. This is like by the summer, and Chesney was getting worried because obviously he didn't want his sister going out with this two-timer, so she had to reassure him, no, it's fine, my days with John are over. And after that, Chesney, no, it was before, but she had to say that because Chesney had pretended that John had hit him. But things did begin to thaw between Fizz and John, and she decides to go to his nan's funeral, and after that they restarted the relationship again. But it didn't last very long. She dumped him, and then in frustration, this is when he kidnaps Rosie, hides her in her nan's in his car, and then he runs off to his nan's old attics and traps her there. So this was another kind of storyline where he was a little bit nuts, and he got himself into this situation that he really shouldn't have got himself into, but the deeper he was into it, the more awkward it had been for him to admit it. So he had Rosie trapped in there. In between all this, Fizz gets back together with him again because he gets involved in the car crash, and then she jumps him again when the truth about Rosie's kidnapping is uncovered, and John is arrested, and that's the last we see of him in 2008. I thought that storyline was quite exciting, and it was just more about him getting into city scrapes and saying that he was going to go and feed his nan's cat. 2009. Gemma, tell us about 2009.
In 2009, he had to go to Highfield Prison for 2 years. So he was in prison for 2 years?
No, he wasn't in prison for 2 years, but he got sentenced for 2 years. You get out for good behaviour because he was out by the end of the year.
Okay. Fizz decided to get Chesney homeschooled because he was being bullied. So she asked John for advice, and then they fell for each other. And then Chesney and the Websters found out, and John decided that he was going to have nothing to do with Fizz anymore. So he gave Rosie £190,000 from his nan's house being sold.
Yeah, after his nan died, he then.
But then he still has the house somehow.
No, I think after the house thing happened, and then after that all happened, the nan's house was sold, so he got the money from that and gave it to Rosie. So
but I thought he still had the house.
I don't think he had the house anymore. I think that was it from then. He got depressed after that because he thought his life was over without Fizz. So he gets put on suicide watch, and then Fizz finds this out and then decides she actually does love him now. So she gets herself chained to the prison gates with a banner saying, "I love you, John Stape." And I think at the time a lot of people were saying that's a little bit silly when that was happening, especially the people who didn't like Fizz. We know there's quite a few people that don't like her. Thought that was a little bit silly. it was just, you know, the next stage in the silly relationship between them. The whole thing was silly, really, but it was still enjoyably silly.
They got engaged and they got married in the prison in October.
Yes.
And then he got released in November. Why they couldn't wait that extra month, I don't know.
Because, you know, urges and everything. Nobody was happy about this.
I don't think you're allowed to consummate it.
No, I don't think you could. I don't know. Anyway, nobody was happy about John being released after everything that happened. But then Rosie tried to kind of get back at him and say that he assaulted her or beat her up or something, I don't know. And then when it was found out that Rosie was making it all up, they suddenly decided, we're going to forgive John. And so it was kind of washed over pretty easily, but I didn't mind as a viewer because I was just happy for him to be back on the show again. Now, in 2010, this is when the whole Colin Fishwick saga started, and it's where the beginning of his very long downfall, and also one of the bits that led into the live episode. So Colin Fishwick was an ex-colleague of his. He decided to move to Canada to live, and obviously John couldn't be a teacher again at this point after everything that happened. He'd been struck off, but just going into the school or whatever to have this party kind of gave him the teaching itch. And then John decided the best thing to do would be to assume Colin's identity and take a job under the name of Colin Fishwick, teaching at Daisyfield High School under the headship of Brian Peckham, and that's where he came into it. He then met another ex-colleague, Charlotte Hoyle, at a teaching conference, and he obviously then had to confess to her that he isn't, or that he's been assuming Colin's identity because everyone was going around calling him Colin and she knew him as John. So, but rather than kind of being was affronted by this, she thought it was all quite exciting, and she got involved in the drama of it all, and then she kind of started falling for him a little bit. Now, before anything could happen there, Colin came back from Canada because he didn't like it there, but we know it's a lovely place, and John had to then own up to him about what had happened. So Colin then ended up getting beaten up by a man whose wife he'd been having an affair with, and that's why he went to Canada in the first place, because he'd been seeing this other guy's wife. He then demands money from John, otherwise he's going to reveal about all the identity fraud thing, but he died of a brain hemorrhage in Fizz's lounge, I think. So this led to a very favourite scene of mine. Charlotte and John got him, wrapped him up in a carpet, and proceeded to smuggle him round the ginnel and out into the factory. And that was a funny nighttime scene, and there was a bit where Colin's hand had like fallen out, and I think Charlotte was holding his hand or something, and then Rita was there, and they almost got uncovered. So it was all kind of funny and bumbly. But they hid him underneath the factory, and Tony Gordon had just blown up the factory, which is why it had to be rebuilt, reconstructed, and then he was cemented over. And then this was exactly the same, I think, as the Callan thing, because the plan wasn't to keep him there forever. They just kind of stored him there for a bit, but when they went there the next day, he'd been cemented over. So pretty inspirational for the current storyline. Also around this time, Fizz announced that she was pregnant. Now Charlotte, who was fancying John at the moment, blackmailed him into having an affair with her. So she was like, I'm going to tell everyone everything about you being back as being a teacher again if you don't start seeing me behind Fizz's back. So on the night of the tram crash, she turned up at the house and demanded that he leave Fizz. He says no to that, so she comes at him with a hammer. He kind of gets it off her, whacks her over the head with the hammer, and that is the end of Charlotte Hoyle, or so he thought. He decided to then leave her outside the joinery, pretending that she was a victim of the tram crash, but she was still alive. Took her to hospital, and then her parents are there. They think that he is Colin Fishwick, her boyfriend, and then when it turns out that even if she does come around, she's going to be brain damaged. They're like, oh, I'll leave it to you whether you want to. I'll let you decide whether or not we turn off her life support. And he's like, okay then, because that kind of makes it very easy for me. And that was the end of Charlotte Hoyle and John's first murder.
Good for him. 2011, he starts doing odd jobs for Colin's mum, Joy, because he feels bad about it. Then he confesses about what happened to Colin and ended up killing her when she was trying to shout at him.
She was trying to shout at a neighbour. He was there. he was there and he kind of kind of semi-confessed, and then she kind of goes a bit nuts, as you would do when you hear this kind of news. Tries to shout out to a neighbour, and he kind of just tries to put his hand over her mouth to muffle her. But old women are frail in that, and she ended up being dead.
Just died.
Yeah.
Chesney gets a
Murder
bit
number 2.
suspicious and discovers that he was at Joy's when she died. Then he tells Charlotte's parents, and they confront him. So he locks them all in the cellar.
Yeah. He also then discovers that Colin is about to be uncovered when they're doing some digging up at the factory again. And he has to dig him up himself. Fizz interrupts him doing this, and then he tells her that, look, you know everything that I've been doing, going under Colin's identity and everything, and I'm going to bring you down with me if you don't help me dispose of this body in the canal. And Fizz is like, okay then. All the way through this, there were so many opportunities for Fizz to have kind of thought, maybe I'm getting in with the wrong one here. But
She didn't, because she's stupid.
she was in love with him. So she agrees to flee the street with him until she discovers that he's got Chesney and the Hoyles locked up in their basement. She goes to she just says, right, I'm leaving you. You better run away if you don't want to get caught. He hides out in the attic for a while. Then he does a runner with Hope, and in all this drama, Fizz is hit by Owen's van. He disguises himself as a doctor next, sneaks into the hospital to go and see Fizz. So she presses the panic button. He's chased up on the roof, and he jumps off it.
Why does she have a panic button? Or is that the nurse?
The nurse button. It's in the drama. It's a panic button,
Right,
but it's just nurse come here button. So yeah,
go about half an hour then.
he was on the front of. He's on the top of the building, and he was like saying, "People died. I just wanted to teach." And then he jumps off, and yet again we think that's the end of John Stape. But no, the mystery continues, because when the police went to go and get his body, he was gone. He was pretty indestructible.
He's like a cockroach.
Yeah.
Fizz goes on trial for the murders of Colin, Charlotte, and Joy, and then John returns. He'd been in Ireland, and he comes back. He kidnaps Rosie. He tells her everything about the deaths, and then so she can tell the court, so get Fizz exonerated. And he's trying to explain to her all the details, and she can't remember it because she's thick. So he gets really frustrated and speeds off to the court himself. Then he gets himself in a car crash on the way there, goes to hospital, and while he's on his deathbed, he confesses everything. And Fizz, for some reason, is instantly freed and is by his bedside somehow.
No, she's allowed to get out because of him being on his deathbed.
Promises that she's forgiven him and she will tell Hope all about him, and then he dies.
A happy man.
What a nice story.
It was fun to watch. Did you not enjoy this storyline when it happened?
Mm-hmm.
Why? It was like it was ridiculous, and I think Coronation Street realised it was ridiculous, but I don't know at what point they decided we're just going to go all out here, because a lot of people bring up this storyline as being just like, this would never happen, all these stupid things happening to this character again and again and again. But I think Coronation Street probably played up to it when they realised there's a lot of kind of black comedy that can be brought to it.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I thought he was funny. He was a funny character. He got himself in scrapes.
He did get himself into a lot of scrapes. And I thought it was kind of funny that it was a teacher, and the fact that, teachers like to moan about it and everything, and we like to go on strike about things because it's a difficult job. And he was like, he wanted to teach so much that he would even kill for it. And I think it's kind of a shame that they killed him off at the end. And even though he had about 3 deaths throughout the whole of this, or 3 near-death situations, it's a shame that he's not like on the loose somewhere, because like we said last week, it'd be quite funny for him to come back and with all this Hope drama that's going on. So he said, the weird thing about John as a character is that he was actually quite comic. I know you killed 2 people, but he wasn't a conventional cloak and dagger soap villain. He was just a hapless guy who wanted a simple life. Everything that happened to him in Weatherfield bordered on the absurd. So that is the end of our John Stape storyline. Do you think that Fizz is better off with Tyrone than she was than John?
I don't know. I mean, Tyrone hasn't cancelled that holiday yet, so who's to say which is the worst?
I think the thing with Fizz, because we kind of liked her and then we got kind of a bit fed up with her. I think Fizz is good when she's paired up with, when she's got somebody good to bounce off, and on her own, or even with another kind of side character, which is mostly what Tyrone is. They're just a bit bland together, aren't they? But with John, who we both really enjoyed watching, it helped to make her a better character. And I think now she's with Tyrone, they've just kind of settled into a bit of a boring, bland life.
A difference between a good character and a nice character.
And even I think it's the same with like the Kirsty storyline as well, because I enjoyed Fizz's small role in that, but that was because they had
Drama.
They had the drama and Kirsty and everything to bounce off of, and it's just gone off the boil a little bit now. Would you like them to have more kind of silly storylines like this, or do you think you can only get away with it?
I quite like the hapless stupidity of it.
Yeah, it's like,
as much as we like to complain about illogical things that happen,
it was completely unbelievable and absurd.
But why would he do that? Why would he do that?
But you kind of once it keeps going, as it starts going, you think I stopped saying that. It's like, oh, what crazy thing is he going to get into next? And it's like, and when he killed Joy by smothering her, it's like, oh, here we go again. And it's rather than just like, no, that's just ridiculous. But I think because Coronation Street by that point knew that it was absurd, like Graham said himself, it's like just kind of go along for the ride.
Yeah.
But it does depend on the characters that are involved, because sometimes, like with Kirk or some of the other characters that are funny, sometimes it just doesn't work. But you can have it all the time.
No, it's good to have a few characters that are just accidentally evil.
Yeah, it was just the unconventional villain of it as well, because I mean, I know there's lots of differences between like Richard Hillman and Adam Bradley and everything, and Tony Gordon, but on the whole, they're kind of similar, cookie cutter villains, aren't they? Like the suave businessman, and that's kind of evil and everything, but with John, it's just a bit of a different role for him.
Just
so
an idiot.
Yeah. So yeah, if any readers would like to let us know what they thought of John Stape,
Listeners.
do let us know. Listeners, indeed. So that is it for our classic character profile.